And welcome back to the fourth and final episode of Tribal Council Chat Presents the Mount Rushmore series. As always, we are your hosts. My name is Bruce Heller. And last week we had a special guest. Well, we've had cool guests on this whole series, but last week we had Kevin Oliver on, who's a co-host and contributor with Reality Realm Network, my co-host over on Pit Stop Pals. We have another awesome guest this week. If Brett, you want to take it away from here.
Joining us today is my co-host on New Generation Challengers, Titi Fernandez, with our final episode of the Mount Rushmore series, talking all about a queen of this game, Parvati Shallow.
Yes. Welcome.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back here.
That's true. I should say welcome back, actually. I do remember. I did not forget.
Yes.
You and I did an episode when Brett was somewhere around the world a few months ago.
Yes.
Hey, so where do we want to just start with Cook Islands?
Yeah, pretty much that's what we've done for 3 episodes, so why change it? We'll just go Cook Islands, then talk about Parv's winning game in Micronesia, go into heroes versus villains, and then the short time we got of her on Winners at War before doing an aligned broadside for Spook.
Sounds good. So, what sticks out to everyone as far as Parvati's game from Cook Islands specifically?
Parvati, it's an interesting season for her because while she plays a decent game, I don't think anybody watching this season was watching Parvati's game and said, "Oh, she's going to become one of like the all-time greats of this game."
Yeah.
In this season, she was just there. She was young and originally applied for Amazing Race, ended up on Survivor through casting, was having a great time. She gave us some amazing confessionals, was really good on TV that season. But this was college age Parvati that was there to make friends and flirt and be a reality star, not what we get later where she's voting people out left, right, and center who can't see it coming.
Yeah, and we kind of skipped the overall thoughts portion that I believe we may or may not have done. I don't remember, but I will say, as someone were to ask me who the best Survivor player of all time was, I think Parvati would be my answer. But Cook Islands is definitely kind of, I would say, weakest gameplay wise. Like, she was there longer than she was on Winners at War, but gameplay wise, like you said, she was college age. She was there to flirt and have fun and make friends. It's interesting watching this version and knowing like, oh, this is the person that goes on to become arguably the greatest player of all time from what we see in Cook Islands, which is kind of a different Parvati than we see in Micro or in Heroes versus Villains, for example.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also think that that kind of casting is kind of missing in the modern era. You also want to have people that are college age, like looking to have a good time, have big personalities. So I think like casting like that would really benefit the casting that we have right now. But like you guys mentioned, it was probably one of her weaker showings just because she was new and she didn't have the stronghold in the strategic game like she does later on.
That's a great point, honestly. Like, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, we are kind of missing that archetype with new era casting.
Yeah.
I've said this to Bruce before, but just to bring it up with UTT because we do our other show together. Could you imagine if something like MTV was taking CBS players way back then and Parvati and Ozzy did like 18 seasons of the challenge by now?
So I did see somewhere that Parvati was originally supposed to be in CT's Real World season, the
She
Real World
was.
Paris, but
She was like the last woman cut or something.
I never
I
knew
think
that.
I think she got cut because she went on Survivor. She got casted on Survivor, so she decided to do that. But like sometimes I think about what would have happened if Parvati would have gone on the real world, and she
Yeah.
probably would have been a challenger, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Even thinking back to like when you brought that up, I was saying that in the trailers that I'm like, this is so unique to now see her and CT on the same show after they met in
Mm-hmm.
casting when they were basically kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to your point, Brett, kind of getting sidetracked here, but that's kind of what I do on this show. So, oh well. Ozzy on the challenge would have been a great match, I think. I think that show is really well suited for him, as physical as it is and as he is.
Yeah, that's very true. But going back to Parvati, the one thing I think she does well in this season, and not to say she doesn't in later seasons, she just is great at this every time she plays. But even not being the strongest player, which was pretty much either a Yule or Jonathan at this point, she does give us a lot of great content, whether it be her line right into the season of "Is this theme kosher?" in episode 1, or when she's getting to know right after the tribe swap, and is he's catching the octopus and she's making full use out of it to be in an alliance with him, even though she knows that she's in the minority of the game at this point in time, and can write a few votes that actually gets her into the merge where she can start playing her own game and maybe does go all the way to the final if it isn't for Yule successfully convincing Jonathan to come back to I2, even though he already mutinied on them.
Yeah. And that's a good point. Who knows if Jonathan Penner doesn't flip back, who knows what happens? I still don't know that I still don't think she wins, but she probably goes deeper than she does.
Yeah. And that goes back to what I was saying last week in a Tony episode. If there isn't this all powerful advantage that Yule has, it's a totally different game.
Yeah. And the super idol is definitely a big part of what gets Yule deep into this game. But I'd like to think that Yule has a good shot at winning anyway. Yule's just a fantastic player in certain aspects of the game. So, what are some before we move on to micro from Cook Islands? What are some of the most memorable Parv moments for you guys that stick out to you?
I feel like you have to say, was it the hot tub scene?
Yeah,
I haven't watched Cook Islands in a long time, so
that's fair.
Yeah, the would certainly with Ozzy and Yule.
Yeah,
I would say also just the way that she handles post mutiny and like working with her allies from day one in Candace and Adam, but just trying to get one day further and one day further and try to interact with the right people, notably Ozzy, to see if there's anywhere that she can go there. And then I'd also say the one thing that Parvati does that, in addition to her confessionals that I just talked about, that makes sure that she gets that spot on micro, is that right away we do see that even and we see this later too, even though she's known for her cutthroat strategic game, she's also an excellent player in the physical game. And that really helps her get the screen time she needs to make a return.
yeah. I would also add, on top of the things we've already said, I would also add kind of one of the things that comes to my mind with her in this season is, and this isn't just her, but she's part of it, is her reaction to Jonathan Penner flipping back to I2 being pretty strong like everyone else's was. But yeah, it's like we said, her gameplay hadn't really developed yet, but she adds a lot to Cook Islands for sure.
and I think she also showed potential to be like a big character on the show that, like you said, secured her spot in Micronesia.
For sure. So, do we have anything else from Cook Islands before we move forward to micro?
I think we're ready to move on. I
Okay.
mean, this season is obviously going to take the most time of all four because she wins it.
Yeah. I'm gonna grab something real quick. You take it away with micro and some of your thoughts on it.
All right, so when we have my Survivor Micronesia, Parvati is a player that, at least I found, was in an interesting position because while she wins the game, she almost gets taken out first.
Yeah.
And she's certainly a target early on before all this issue comes up with Fair Play's kid, or did he quit, or did he have a wrestling injury, or nobody really knows why Fair Play had to go home, other than the fact that I don't think really anybody liked the idea of being on a favorite beach with a guy with John's reputation. But otherwise, she was in a lot of trouble to start this game.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's another reason why her Micronesia game was so dominant. And that's because she was able to go from almost being the first person voted out to winning the whole game. And the reason why she was almost voted out was because she was such a big target. So I think it's really interesting that she was able to kind of climb out of that hole that she was in and take that olive branch from Fair Play quitting, asking people to vote him out. I don't know, and go on to actually winning the game.
Simply. And it's interesting at this point, too, because right after that happens, I think we start to get this kind of like break between, even though it's the favorites tribe. Sorry, welcome back, Bruce. We were just talking about how Parv almost gets voted out
Yeah, I could.
of the first episode and then goes on to win the game.
Yeah, I heard all of that. I love all that discussion. First off, I do kind. We'll never know the full story, but I do want to know what the fair play thing was because I've heard so many different stories on that. But it really is a great example of she kind of got a second chance and then ran with it and took advantage of it. And the ability to do that is huge.
Yeah, I feel like not
Exactly.
many people can go from almost being the first person voted out to going to winning the game. So it's really impressive that she did that.
And
And I think what I was getting into as Bruce came back is exactly how she does this. That the whole tribe is favorites, but I think there starts to be a between the players who are favorites who know each other and the older players that are favorites who knew each other. So there's this alliance going on that forms that's her and that's really all players that came from like the seasons right for this season. And we're all big in the survivor community right at that time.
yeah. And by the way, the thing I went to go get was my Amanda Kimmel sweatshirt that I meant to wear when we started this, and then realized partway through recording I forgot. So took that opportunity. But yeah, and it's interesting. It's early on in the fans' favorites tribe. You have the Parv and Amanda, and you've got the other side of Jonathan and Yao Man, and there's kind of two camps of it, like you mentioned, and we're all vying for Cerie's vote, kind of in the middle. And I think what's kind of an underrated move that doesn't necessarily get talked about as much is Parv and Amanda taking Cerie out on a boat on the water, just the three of them, and making their pitch to her, and that really being what sways her over to their side.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you mentioned on a boat too, because when you do go out on a boat in Survivor, they can make sure that Penna or Eliza isn't making this pitch to Sui at the exact same time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that out of those three, like when they developed their Black Widow Brigade alliance, like that was really the turning point, and that's what really swayed Suri to choose to go with them. And I think
Yeah.
that Parvati was the strategic mastermind in that more than Amanda was.
Yeah. I think going into final two, and I'm jumping ahead a bit, but we'll jump around. I think coming in, Parvati and Amanda both had good, different but good arguments to win. One of them just did a lot better than the other at that final tribal council, which is a huge, important skill to be able to explain your game well and own up to stuff at tribal council, which unfortunately has proven to be my homegirl Amanda's fatal flaw. But
Going back to the formation of that alliance, there's one thing too that I don't think gets talked about in this season as much when it comes to winning over Sui's vote, because we all know what happens after the merge and it kind of falls apart. But we shouldn't completely discount the fact that, at least if we look at it from a pre-merge angle and pretend we know nothing about the merge tribe or the fans tribe or anything that goes on there, it's not two votes getting Sui votes vote to be a third, because both Parv and Amanda seem to have a showmance going at this point.
yeah, true. You have James and Ozzy, which is, yeah. So Suri comes over and joins them and is 5, and with fair play going home, it's a tribe of 9. So 5's majority. But yeah, the early on couples alliance was huge in the until the swap, I guess, when it gets broken up. But that was a dominating force on the original Molotov for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then with those numbers, it's very difficult to beat. But you mentioned the swap, so let's talk about the swap, because I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I think this swap is. I'm just reviewing things before I say this, but I think I'm about to say it. This swap is the best strategic decision made in the history of Survivor.
Wow. I don't know if I'm not gonna pinpoint one thing and say that without doing a bunch of research, but one thing she does great here is thinking ahead, and she knew her and Amanda were like this, that they were staying together. She's met Natalie and Alexis, who she likes, and kind of forms this alliance of 4, trusting that her top ally that's on another beach will just ride with it, and really kind of starts to think ahead towards the merge, even thinking into the next phase of the game instead of just trying to survive each individual vote right now.
Yeah, I think that, like Brett said, it was like one of the most strategic moves because she was able to, instead of just trusting that she will be fine and meet up with her allies again, she recognizes that James and Ozzy aren't somebody who you'd want to take to the end, and they are very physical threats. So she recognized that these aren't the people she probably wants to keep on playing with, but also she went and formed new connections and new alliances of people that she would want to keep playing with.
Yeah. And building an alliance while one of the alliance members is on a complete other beach is just such an incredible move that
Exactly.
it deserves credit.
And that's where I was going with that, is the fact that she's able to pull this move off, and that alliance that I was just talking about a few seconds ago, both of these guys out, and then take an alliance that she made, including Sui and Amanda, without Sui and Amanda even there, but still promising the two of them that they'd go further than these two new girls that she just made another alliance with. There's so many moving parts to this move. And
And
the fact
everybody
that Parvati
trusted
could
her.
pull it off is just, I don't think there's anything that matches it game wise.
No, it's especially not this
Especially
season.
when we're, yeah, I was going to say, especially when we're considering the fact that it's hard to compare eras of this show, but Parv was able to make this move too just by the power of being Parvati, the great survivor player. She wasn't telling Natalie or Amanda or Alexis or Suri, do this and I'll give you this advantage, or any of these things we see in the modern game. It was just, this is the way we're going to get to the end, and fifth is good enough for you because when the 5 of us get to the end, I'm going to win.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it wasn't exchanging advantages or anything like we see now. It was the power of persuasion, and a smile can go a long way sometimes, and she worked that to her advantage really well. She knows her strengths and uses them to her best advantage, and it's impressive to watch.
Yeah, I think also to have such like a dominating and trustworthy game player, I guess you can call it, you also have to have some people that aren't the brightest, and I feel like that's why we don't see that very much in the modern era because people know that like, okay, I can work with this person, but I need to get them out. And I think in the old school days, like you were able to persuade people that maybe they also have a chance at winning and they would let you or they would work with you till the end and not vote you out. But I think now that's something that you can't do.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
someone. So,
Um, and like you said earlier, OTG, I think casting has a lot to do with that. In that, if though today only casting these huge Survivor fans, which I get from a production perspective, there's multiple sides of the same coin. But if that's the code that they've decided to play as casting, we're not going to get somebody like Jason again, who literally has no clue what he's doing, and Eliza has to tell him that his so-called immunity idol is an effing stick.
Yeah,
yeah,
or was it Woe choosing to take Tony to the end? And
yeah,
now people say that Tony is the best Survivor player of all time. I'm not saying that he's not, but it's also like you have to have some people that aren't very bright
yeah.
or aren't willing to make those things to have those good gameplays show up.
Um, what's his name? Taylor, a few weeks ago.
Oh, on Millennials versus Gen X.
This running joke now because Taylor from Millennials versus Gen X, I could not remember. I could just remember that he misplayed his showmance and misplayed his advantage and hid food. And I asked Bruce a question in a live episode that went, "What is that idiot's name?"
Because he was the answer to one of my questions in our trivia episode, and I asked the question, and you knew who
That
it
was
was,
it.
but I couldn't remember his name. But yeah, and Jason Siska on Micronesia, by the way, gets a lot of flack for the stick. But let's not forget also that the guy stepped down in an immunity challenge because a bunch of people he knew were targeting him said they wouldn't vote him out if he stepped out of that challenge.
You literally.
Like, what are you doing? And it's still, neither of those are somehow the dumbest moves in that season alone. Because Eric does what he does at 5. Which, to be fair to Eric, he just got completely played and outplayed by a strong group of women there. Like, I don't think he ever stood a chance there, but
And,
still.
and even more so than a strong group of players, I think Eric is a big enough fan of this show that I think if he's on an all newbie season, it doesn't matter who's there. There's no way that happens. He was totally starstruck to be on a beach with Parvati, Amanda, and Sui.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of Eric, I'll say this because I've seen it kind of discussed and debated online who deserves the credit for that move. And I feel like it's a team effort. Like it was Cerie's plan originally, but then Natalie was the one that really kind of
Pulls
brought
it
it
off.
up and brought it up to him and was pressuring it. And Parv and Amanda apply the pressure at tribal council. Without any of those people, it doesn't work. Like I think the credit needs to be shared amongst all 4 of them equally.
Yeah, and it reminds me it's such a shame that we never saw Natalie come back.
No, so annoying.
Bruce and I probably talked about that on this podcast about a dozen times in a
Al-
year.
Also, shout out to Natalie's jury question that we talked with Steven about on our jury questions episode. That is just
Yeah.
one of the strangest, funniest scenes of the show. But I think another huge move of hers this season, moving backwards a little bit from where we are, is the Ozzy move too, and not just being smart enough to blindside Ozzy, who was in her alliance, but having that relationship built with Amanda, where when Amanda is hurt and feeling kind of betrayed for being left out of the Ozzy vote and them taking out her showmance, Parvati's still able to regain that relationship and that trust. Like Amanda isn't lost as an ally in a number, and
Yeah.
when in a lot of cases that would be like that alliance would be broken up for good after that. But she's able to bring Amanda back into the fold, and they keep going.
Yeah, and I think though, like after we see that Parvati wins that season and then we see them come up in Heroes versus Villains, we can see how Amanda's, and we'll talk about that later on, but how that changed probably her perception of Parvati just based off of what happened in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you brought up Natalie, so I just have to bring this up with Ozzy. It might not be as well remembered by like the casual fan of the show just because Natalie's was so unexpected. But Ozzy gives Natalie a good run for her money for the most cringeworthy jury question of the season.
Oh, his is way more cringy. Hers was at least funny and bizarre.
Exactly.
What
Like,
was his again? I can't remember.
his was
He
just super
basically
bitter and
just
berating her
scolded
the whole
Parvati
time.
for
What?
Ozzy was just scolding Parvati for taking time that he could have had away with Amanda on the beach.
Oh.
And being super bitter at her for taking him out as well. It was
Yeah.
wild. And then he kind of made it professing his feelings for Amanda after being super bitter. It was weird.
Yeah. I think that does make or remind me of something strange that happened in that.
But yeah. So do we have any other like what else do we want to talk about from Micro?
Um, should we talk about the jury votes? Who voted for who, maybe?
That's
Yeah.
exactly where I
I was trying to
gonna
look
go.
it up on my phone, but I
Let me pull Wikipedia up.
That's one thing while you do that, Boost, that I was just going to say, just because I know where one jury vote goes that I wanted to talk about, is I think that's really how Pove successfully wins this game. Is like you talked about Amanda having a weaker final tribal council. I think despite being on opposite sides, one other thing that Parvati does well is still maintains relationships with players that she's not playing against so that they don't playing with, at least to the point that they don't hold it against that notably Eliza when she has to pick between two players that she didn't really want to vote for.
Yeah, for sure.
and also I think it is worth mentioning that since this was a fans versus favorites, you see that the fans mostly are more prepared or more willing to vote for somebody who played the best game and not necessarily who they hate or who they don't like or whatever. And I think that is a big reason why Parvati won that season is because you had people, because back in the day, a lot of the old school people don't really appreciate the gameplay and they're just going to vote for whoever they like the best. So I think that she was able to pull in, or it was really smart of her to bring a lot of the fans into the jury so that she was able to get the win.
Yeah,
But I just looked it up. I think it was Eric, James, and Ozzy who voted for Amanda.
it is. I'm looking at it now also. Which Ozzy, that was his showmance, and he's obviously pulled resentment towards Parvati for being blindsided. James, I'm guessing, was kind of based out of bitterness because he and Parv had a showmance early on. Then he was kind of taken aback when she started shifting towards the girls' alliance. Eric, I can't explain. Like I don't know what
I
I don't know what his deciding factor was.
I think that his was more based off he saw Amanda as like I guess not as cutthroat as he did Parvati. So
Yeah.
maybe that was why he
I can
chose
see that.
her.
And it may have just been as simple as he was had a closer relationship with her in the game. I'm not sure, but
Yeah, or also he could have been bitter that that move was pulled, so he in his because he looked obviously very dumb doing that, so he probably thought in his head, I'm not going to vote for the more strategic player. I'm going to vote for whoever I like best because I don't agree with the strategic moves that were made that were not very nice or something.
Yeah. And even in the season as a whole, if we take anything game out of it, Eric just seemed to be closer to both Amanda and Sui within the game than he did anyone else really on the beach, other than maybe some people at the original fans tribe that went early.
I think he and Natalie were kind of close at a certain point, maybe. Because
Yeah.
she's who they send to him to talk, like, plant the idea in his head about the necklace thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think you're right. I think Eliza's jury vote in winning that over it is underrated because we definitely see some tension between Parvati and Eliza early on in the season, which leads to her going home. So the fact that Parvati was able to win that jury vote back over is huge. Because if Eliza votes for Amanda, we have a tie game. And one of my biggest questions about this show is this season was almost a tie. What happens if it was? There's not a third juror to give the vote to. So
That's a great point. They had something, but they've never told us what it is.
yeah. Oh, they absolutely had some sort of contingency, but what it was,
Sure.
probably never.
Because even dating all the way back to Survivor Borneo, when Jeff and Mark are explaining how this show works to the audience that have never seen it before, you constantly see them say over and over and over again, the one thing we know is there is only one winner.
Yeah.
See,
And
I think, sorry, I think like in my brain, the thing that would probably happen, which I could be totally wrong, is that they would ask the jury again if anybody wishes to change their vote and then give them an opportunity, kind of like when there's a tie. And then if there's no change, then maybe they would have them draw rocks.
interesting.
I
That
would be
could
down
happen.
for that.
Because
Yeah.
if we do, like, knowing that we do see a tie and knowing that there's only one winner and that has been reiterated many times, I think that they wouldn't let two winners win.
No, they wouldn't. It would be really fun to know what the contingency plan was, but I like your idea.
Let's say under the idea that Eliza does originally vote for Amanda and we have a tie, I think there's a good chance if you put it that way that either Eliza or Eric change their vote.
Yeah, I think Eliza's more likely than Eric, but
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
so
Because
move.
if she was already in between, she probably wouldn't have a hard time choosing the other one.
Yeah, for sure. And so, do we have anything else we want to touch on from Micro before we move into heroes versus villains?
I'm ready to move on.
I'm good to move on to.
So, heroes versus villain, and this might be my hot take or unpopular opinion that I should have said on our tree mail episode a few weeks back that aired. I feel I could probably create an argument that heroes versus villains is the best game she played, even though she didn't win the season.
Yeah.
Because
I honestly would agree with that too.
I think after Micronesia, she clearly comes in with this giant target where she escapes it, but she's a target. Her name is out there early on her own tribe. And the other tribe has someone boneheaded enough to want to send his idol over to someone that the only thing he knows about is this person is a villain. The other tribe is sending that guy an idol saying, take her out. And that target really never goes away, and she goes all the way to the end anyway, and kind of was making a lot of the decisions and had some power in the mid to late post merge.
I think going back like late to the beginning almost kind of goes where Parvati does do so well to get that target out of the way and win the season. And it goes back to kind of like what I said about her in Micronesia that she took a huge risk making that alliance with Natalie and Alexis. Here she does it again, where everybody in this game is probably the most if you ask them which player are you the most weary of, the answer they'd probably give you is Russell. Not because he's Russell, they have no clue who Russell is. But that's why. It's because they know nothing about him. He just finished playing a couple of weeks ago. And Parvati, knowing that there's a target on her, dives headfirst into this alliance with a guy that nobody knows, knowing that there's a good chance if you just played and you're a villain, there's probably a reason that people wanted you back on this on the and specifically wanted you back on the villain's tribe.
Yeah. And I think part of that alliance was also, and I could be remembering wrong, I don't think there was exactly a lot of people lining up wanting to align with her on the villains tribe too. I think Russell was kind of the option. So that again, that kind of just plays into target from day one. People wanted her out, even on her own tribe. Like people didn't want to align with her early on. And she still goes all the way to the end and gets a few jury votes also.
Yeah, I think because I have seen people make an argument that there in Micronesia there was supposed to be a final three because it was no longer the final two format, and they had so many medevacs that they had to make it a final two, and a lot of people say that sorority would have won if she was in the final tribal council. And I mean, I don't know if that's exactly how I feel, but I think that her showing in Heroes versus Villains was very, very good, and it showed that like she did deserve that win, even if some people say that she shouldn't have won and somebody else would have won.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And this is taking nothing away from Sandra, by the way. I've said before, I'll say it again. If you win, you definitely deserved it. You got the jury votes. I would have given Parvati my jury vote to win because I feel like she had a harder road to get there than Sandra. Sandra was able to kind of just fly under the radar and never really had the same target on her or threat level that was attached to Par. But at the same time, I think the reason Sandra ends up winning is, well, other than that she can say to the heroes, I tried to warn you about Russell. I tried to work with you. You didn't listen. I feel like in the heroes, because the heroes were basically the jury, I feel like they didn't think Parv did enough to separate herself from Russell. But, I mean, we saw she has a whole extra idol he doesn't know about. We see a couple things where there's even a confessional where she says what he doesn't know won't hurt him. So I don't really know like what could have been done to separate herself from Russell more other than just blindsiding him, which wouldn't have helped her game any.
No.
I think because obviously Russell would have, if it was, let's say it was a final two, Parvati would have beat Russell, obviously. But I think Russell's one of his biggest mistakes, even though he doesn't have a very high winning potential, was getting rid of Danielle just to spite Parvati. Because if you have Danielle instead of Sandra, Danielle was always in the villains. So I think Russell should have realized that for him to have any shot of winning at all, he has to be in there with Danielle instead of Sandra.
For someone as great strategically as Russell Hantz is, he doesn't have a great like awareness of the game this season. Because he takes Danielle out, not realizing it's a terrible move. Not only because you're taking at your own number, but your top number, Parvati, you're ticking her off with this. But he also goes to the end with Sandra, thinking she's a goat and won't get any votes. Like for someone as good strategically as Russell is, his awareness of the game is really bad in this season.
Yeah, and like Bruce, like you mentioned, I don't like taking away from people that have won, let alone winning twice. But I do think that if you look at this season, like on paper, just strategically, Sandra doesn't hold any or some, if any, strategic agency at all. And that's like we said, there was different times and different cast members. When you have older era cast members, you're not going to see the same turnouts as you do with a newer era. But I mean, anything can happen because even this last season, a lot of people think that Charlie was more strategic, but some people said they valued more the friendship and the connections that they saw. So I think, like you said, it's about knowing how to read the jury and catering your game to the jury because there's no guarantee that you're going to win.
Yeah. And the first time I watched Heroes versus Villains, I kind of didn't understand the game Sandra was playing at Final Tribal because she keeps repeating the phrase, I tried to get Russell out. That was my mission from day one. And I'm sitting there thinking, why are you flexing this? You failed at that mission. He's sitting next to you. And I still kind of feel that way. Like her biggest flex at Final Tribal was something she wasn't able to accomplish. But nonetheless, in saying that, she's proving to the heroes, you don't like these two. I clearly wasn't with them. Vote for me because I'm not them. And I think that is kind of what won it for her, and that she did try to warn the heroes about Russell at the merge, but they fell for whatever lie he was telling them at the time, and it sunk them. But I think either one of the two women would have been a fantastic winner for Heroes versus Villains. The only way I would have been annoyed is if Hans would have won, which isn't happening. So with this jury at least.
It reminds me of something Parvati said on Traders. I feel like the heroes were playing the holier than thou game that they were kind of stuck to that and they vote for the most morally good person instead of more of who the real or not who the more strategic person was in the game, who had more control of the game.
Yeah. And as annoying as he is, there is one thing I agree with Hans on this season, is when he kind of just sits down and tells Rupert that Rupert's acting all high and mighty and holier than thou and by the fire.
Yeah.
That was just kind of most of the hero's attitude that season. The scene I think was interesting isn't, I don't even think me and Brett have talked about this much on this show, is early merge, the Parvati Amanda conversation that happens, where
Yeah.
they're kind of trying to feel each other out. Amanda's committed to working with her team and up to this point, and Parvati's the same way. And they're kind of realizing that. But Amanda, again, not a great actress. They're coming after you. You should play your idol. You should play your idol. That kind of gives it away. And again, I love Amanda, but that kind of gave it away that they weren't coming after Parvati. You're just trying to flush the idol. That wasn't super believable. But that conversation just it feels awkward because they both know that they're sticking with their teams. But
Yeah, and that conversation was what led to arguably the best strategic move that has ever been played in Survivor history, which that's my opinion. But the double idol play and her not even playing one for herself, but just like you said, Amanda's not a very good actress, but you also would think since she has two idols, she would do like an insurance policy just in case somebody would throw the boat on Parvati, and she didn't even play that idol. And I think that it just shows how smart she is as a player and how good of a Survivor player she is.
yeah, for sure. And I agree. I do love the not double blindside, double idol play. Sending JT home because of his own idol that he dumbly gave up. But and yeah, Amanda is a great player. In my opinion, the best to never win. Not a great actress. And that kind of is what gave away that Parvati wasn't in danger. You can play your idols for other people. And it ends up where she wastes an idol on Sandra because Jerry was the only person receiving votes, but smart move nonetheless.
Yeah, exactly. I think when we talk about that conversation between Parvati and Amanda, just to back up there quickly, I think it's interesting in this season, but And they used the word. I was trying to backtrack in my head. Is this the first time that they used the word versus in the theme? They didn't. They used it in Micro for fans versus favorites. But in that season, and it's thanks to Parvati, as we talked about, it doesn't really play out that way. There's a lot of integration between both fans and favorites. In this season, I almost think production got what it wanted with that theme title, and that's why Parvati and Amanda aren't able to work together as two former allies, because they really pushed hard for this needs to be the heroes against the villains, and this almost fantasy like battle of good and evil that really Sandra is the only one to even consider crossing that boundary, knowing that Rupert is on the other side, and even then she intelligently votes him out, knowing that he'll vote for her as opposed to any other villain, because she's the most heroes of the villains.
Yeah, I do think. Well, first off, I think this is the only time when Versus was in the title that they kept their division stuck to their divisions like that the whole time. Because Heroes, Healers, Hustlers didn't. David versus Goliath didn't. If there's others, I'm forgetting them. But Blood versus Waters sort of did, but also didn't. Both of them.
There's one unique thing about this season compared to all of those other ones we talked about, and that's that there is no tribe swap.
True. Even if both tribes didn't have this strong not wanting to cross that line, I don't know if that changes anything with Parv and Amanda, because I don't know that Amanda was super keen on working with the person she had just lost to after losing 2 seasons in a row.
Yeah, I think she definitely was probably like after the season regretted playing with Parvati and just kind of had some animosity towards her just because she did play with her and she was the one that lost the game. And even if they were good friends, it's still a hard thing to accept that you lost $1 million and you decided to take that person to the end with you, you know?
Yeah.
But back to the heroes and villains divide and the heroes voting for who they think is the less villainous person, it makes me wonder if when there was equal numbers, if JT wouldn't have been voted out and it was an all heroes final and the villains on the jury, I wonder if the villains would have voted for somebody who was the most villainous of the heroes, like the most strategic person out of there and not the holier than thou person.
Good point. I mean, it's pretty hard to separate, say, Rupert and Colby, who go the furthest in the heroes camp. But maybe if they do have that split in those and they don't keep it the whole time, maybe there is a moment where later in the season, say, a JT or an Amanda can really scoop up that vote.
I
Or
think
Candace, was she the third one?
Yeah, great point.
I think because she was the one that was plotting with Russell on them, if I
And she
remember.
was the one who's already, could be argued, could have been on the villain's beach after mutinying in Cook Islands.
Yeah, I think out of those three, you could argue that the villains would have voted for Candace because she was the only one that was trying to get out of the hero circle.
I think if the heroes get merged numbers, the winner is either JT, Candace, or Amanda, because they're kind of the only 3 heroes that were playing any sort of hard. Like the Colbys and the Ruperts were kind of just there, especially early on.
I'm inclined to agree with you, Bruce. The one thing, though, that I think would be hardest for them is that the 3 of them could, depending on the jury, have to go together, because there has to be some people out there who just would have wanted to see Colby or Rupert be a winner of Survivor.
Yeah, true. Rupert won fan favorite, most popular player, however, 2 times in a row, I think. So, but that's fans. Well, I was gonna say is someone like Coach, but Coach being Coach honestly might just vote for Rupert because he's Rupert. But is someone like, say, Russell gonna sit on a jury and vote for Rupert just because he's Rupert?
Probably not.
Coach Coach, remember, he voted for Parvati because she was good at the challenges.
Huh.
That's what he said. So Coach would only vote for the person that was athletic, I guess.
Yeah, I stopped trying to understand Coach a long time ago.
I never tried.
I tried the first time. Well, I saw Heroes versus Villains was the first season of him I saw, and didn't realize that was kind of the milder version of him. Then I watched, eventually got to Token Chains. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a jacked up level. I'm done trying to understand this. His Token Chains Coach is just an experience all on its own. If you haven't watched Token Chains, go watch it, listeners. Great season.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Coach, Danielle, and Jerry were her 3 jury votes. And so, like Titi just said, Coach said that he voted based off of the physical challenges.
Yeah.
Danielle and Parvati were super tight the whole time. Danielle knew about the second idol before Parvati's supposed #1 Russell ever did.
Yeah.
Jerry is the one that's interesting to me here.
Well, Parvati did play an idol for Jerry, and and I feel like Jerry was more, because if I remember correctly, Jerry was working with Russell more, and that in turn is working with Parvati
So,
instead of working with Sandra. So I think that she knew Russell was kind of evil, but she thought that Parvati was smart.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. And then the Sandra's votes were Colby, Rupert, Candace, Amanda, JT, and Courtney. So the 6 heroes plus her #1 ally. So like her trying to tell the heroes at the merge, hey, Russell's lying to you. He doesn't actually want to work with you, like he's saying. I think that was a huge difference. I think that was a smart move by her, but like I said, both of the 2 women in this final 3 deserve to win. They were both incredible this season.
exactly. None of the votes are that surprising in this season, but if either Parvati or Sandra wins, it's one of the top games of all time, no matter which way it went.
Yeah, as long
Because
as
it
it
would have been two-time winner either way.
yeah, as long as it wasn't Hans, I'm happy with whoever wins this season. And even he, like, he's terrible socially and seems to treat people awfully at camp, but strategically, even he played a great game this season. Like, this final 3 really doesn't have someone like, say, a Sherry and Karamoan, where you're like, how did you get here? That's just the example I use. There's a few of those throughout the show's history, but 3 strong-ish finalists this season, for sure.
Yeah, there was no layup or goat that in that final tribal. I feel like every person had a strong argument to win, and that argument may not have gone for all the jury, but every person could have sat there and said, I deserve to win because of X, Y, and Z, and not just, well, I was taken here.
Yeah. I think another move, I'm just trying to think of moves from this season, is when her and Danielle find the idol clue at the reward and then find the idol. Not telling Russell about that was kind of smart, because at that point they'd been playing the same game together the whole time. So that kind of not enough, I guess, but differentiated her game from Russell a little bit and allowed her to kind of have a little bit more power on her own than just being part of a duo.
Did the villains, or no, did the heroes get to see that Russell was not in the loop about the second idol? Like, was that explicitly said in front of them, or was it just the Danielle being voted out?
I don't know. I know when she plays both of them, Russell looks at her and says, "You have some explaining to do." And her response
Yeah.
was, "It's a secret." But I don't know if they ever explicitly said that to the heroes that he didn't know about that.
Or maybe the heroes heard that sentence but like didn't think much of it or whatever, which that could have been another reason that they still associated both of their games together.
Yeah, because I definitely think she loses because she was too attached to him in the hero's eyes. But
Absolutely.
so, do we have anything else we want to touch on before we move forward to heroes versus villains, and then any other
I think you
appearances?
mean winners at war.
Winners at War, I meant. Yeah. Do we have anything
No,
else from heroes versus villains?
I do not.
so influence I have to make the heroes versus villains actually happens in Winners at War. So
We'll
I
take
can start it off there if you guys want.
take it away with Winners at War.
Um, we just talked about how none of the villains want to work with Parvati, and then she's forced to find Russell. Once we get to Winners at War, we have this like new alliance. Let's shock everybody. And what if Rob and Parvati work together on the first episode? Just fascinating.
I love this old school alliance on Cele. Actually wearing my Winners at War Cele buff right now. But this
It's right
alliance,
behind me.
and for those of you that don't know, the Cele buff is is the basis for our show's logo. So it's this old school alliance of her and Rob and Ethan. I hadn't even like I having started at 36, I hadn't seen a lot of their earlier seasons yet. But I loved it then and I love it more now having seen it. I love that alliance of her and Rob and Ethan. And I love that they hang out all the time outside of the show now also. It's fantastic. It makes me happy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I liked seeing the Instagram post of, I think it was her, Rob, Tyson. I don't remember who it was, but they made a post saying that they have an alliance for season 50. Obviously
Mhm.
trolling. Hopefully they all are on season 50, but I really like to see that they do still keep a close friendship.
Yeah. I hope I don't know which. I hope at least a couple of them are on 50. I don't want 50 to just be a complete repeat of the Winners at Warcast, which was mostly legends. But I hope at least a couple of them are on there for sure. But it just, I think coming in with the target she had from Micro and adding to that with such a strong game in Heroes versus Villains, I think Parvati, and I've said this about Rob, but it's true about her also, never really had a shot to go deep in Heroes versus Villains. Not Winners at War,
In winners, yeah.
done that twice now. But it just,
Just kind of like if Tony were to come back for season 50, he would not have a single shot to get far into the game.
no,
I
I
think
didn't.
the only person I can see that's a legend that can actually make it far into the game would be someone like Sandra, because
Yeah.
I feel like she's not good at challenges, so people understand that they can vote her out at any point. And also a lot of people don't think that her games is a very strategic game, so I feel like a lot of people would kind
I
of
think,
want to
I think,
take her.
I think Sandra's strategic game is underrated, but her game is definitely mostly social. It's building relationships and like with Pearl Islands, for example, taking Tawana back into the bushes to eavesdrop. Here's what they're saying about you. But I I think her main goal is flying under the radar. So
Yeah.
the fact that she came back as the only two-time winner in the show's history on Game Changers and made it till the second swap, and on both of her first two tribes was in the majority and had power. That's just kind of a testament to the social game she plays. She builds relationships really well.
But
Whereas,
I think she's not, like, I agree she's a very social player, but she's not very self-aware. And I think that's what distinguishes her and Parvati's game is Parvati is very self-aware of situations like here at Winners at War, we knew that, or she knew that she was on the bottom. She knew that she was going to get voted out. And I feel like Sandra is just not as self-aware in those situations and she's almost kind of clueless. Like when she gave Denise the idol and said, "Oh, I'm all good here. Use it to do whatever. I don't care." And then that ended up being the reason that she gets voted out. I feel like as a what this would be her fourth time playing Survivor, as a fourth time Survivor player, you should be self-aware enough to know that you don't give another person an idol. Unless
Yeah.
if you do want to save them, you play it for them, but doing that like that just gives somebody else an opportunity to put a huge move on their resume.
Being said, I just want to quickly add in, like, if we're talking legends, like players from the first 15 seasons or so, then yes, I agree. Someone like Sandra might be the only one who could go far. That being said, if they were to both come back for 50, and I'm sure you both will probably agree because I'm going to each bring up one of your favorite players of all time, but like some more modern players that I would still consider legends of the game, I'm thinking of Michelle and Natalie here, could go very far.
Yeah. And only played once. I feel like this person's a legend, but I might be biased. I feel like Todd Herzog has a good shot to go deep into another game, honestly. I could
Yeah, I could
also
see that.
see him getting targeted early though, because he's so well known. And he just put on such a master class in China. So I could kind of see that one going either way.
I think it also
Yeah.
depends on I think not necessarily like the most obvious sign, but a big sign for me is how good are they going to be in the daily challenges or yeah, I guess they're daily now. But if you have
Yeah,
someone like Sandra, let's say, or whoever who isn't gonna be very good at the challenges, there's a higher chance that they're gonna be voted out because if your tribe, and we've seen it in the newer seasons, like if you have a tribe that doesn't lose, you're a lot of times they go straight to the merge. So I think it also depends on who is the weakest link in the game, and if you have somebody that maybe is older or isn't as in shape or whatever, there's a higher chance that they're not going to make it to the merge just due to the fact that they're not good at the challenges and their team can be dragged down by them.
Yeah, for sure. And thinking about Parv with here, Winners at War, a lot of times when someone gets voted out, especially voted out early, you can kind of point at here's where things went wrong or here's something they could have done better. I can't think of that moment here. I just genuinely think the target level she came in with was too big to overcome. Like she was always going to go out about that time in this season, I believe.
I can see that. It seemed about the time that she would go out. The only thing we didn't touch on that I think is really important here is that the way the swap goes. Because who would have known that she would have been swapped onto a tribe of six with five people who pregame together?
Yeah, that is true.
So so even though you get those great moments where it's like you see when there's at least the way it's being edited that we're seeing some tension, and then you see Parv and Michelle off together, that alliance was never turning into an alliance. Parvati and Yul was never turning into an older school duo against the newer school players because Yul decided he was going to pregame with all the younger kids before they went out there.
Which is just shocking to me, by the way, from everything we've seen of Yule. But that surprises
But
me for whatever reason.
but it's smart of him to know that based on the numbers, that was probably the way the season was going to be going, and he needed to either go with it or he'd be out.
Yeah. How great was it for you, of all people, by the way, Brett, having Michelle and Parvati in an alliance on original Cele and to an extent swapped Cele? Because it seemed like Michelle kind of wanted to find a way to save her and just couldn't. But how great was that duo for you specifically?
It was great to watch, especially as my like I always say about Cele. Cele is my favorite tribe of all time. Of my five favorite castaways to ever play the game, four of them were on Cele, and one of them is deceased.
Yeah.
So I was watching Michelle, my number one, Rob, my number two, Parv, my number three, Ethan, my number four, Rudy's the other one in there who, for obvious reasons, couldn't be playing. One didn't win two. But it was like all of my favorite players were on this same tribe on day one.
Yeah, Sele and Fei Long are my two favorite tribes. I'd probably give the edge to Sele just because of the legend status of the players on that tribe, but those are my two favorites. We'll have to do a favorite tribes episode sometime. I just got that idea. But
It's a great idea for next offseason.
yeah, Winners at War, there's just not a ton to talk about with her here. She was on there
Yeah,
a short time and doesn't get a ton of screen time when she is in the game.
yeah, and I think it's just the curse of being such a good Survivor player in the past. The last time she had played was in Heroes versus Villains, so that's 3 seasons where her first season she didn't make it to the final tribal, but 2 seasons where one she won and the other one a lot she didn't win, but she made it to the end, and a lot of people said that she should have won. So I think any person that's coming in is gonna see her as a target, and there's really nothing that she can do about that.
Yeah.
This
So
moment of Winners at War right before we get in, because there's one more. Well, there's Pug obviously still technically being shown in the game even after she gets voted out through the edge of extinction. Not a whole lot happens with that other than the fact that she sells Michelle an advantage for 4 tokens, and the tokens do pretty much nothing. But the one thing I wanted to bring up here was that's I at least is a notable Parvati moment just because of how her fans see her outside of the game all the time through social media. How great was it to see Parv's daughter Amma as like just over 1 years old be on the edge of extinction with her during the family visit?
that was fantastic. And I do kind of want to touch on this also. You made me think of it. We kind of saw a little bit of a Parv Natalie duo form on Edge with a lot of the challenges they were together. With the extortion, they kind of brainstormed together who should we send this to that will cause chaos in the game because of it. And
Only needed to think about that for about 2 seconds.
well, Tony is just chaos incarnate when it comes to Survivor. That's why he is so entertaining. But
Yeah.
he's also paranoia incarnate. I guess he's both. But and I do kind of think that helped Natalie out at the end because we end up seeing Natalie get a chunk of jury votes that my guess would be Parv was kind of championing for those votes because one of them was Ethan, who's like one of her best friends in and out of the game.
Yeah.
So let me go to
Jeremy was another one who's the godfather of her children, so that would
That's
make sense.
true. That one was going her way anyway.
But
I
yeah,
definitely think she was probably on the
Or no,
jury.
not Jenny, Tyson.
that vote pissed me off. So I don't.
Tyson? Yeah, Jeremy, Tyson, Parvati, Ethan were the four. So like those are the four she got. But given the duo we saw of them on the edge, I'm guessing she was probably campaigning to get Natalie votes at Ponderosa after Edge was over. Also,
Can see that.
I have no proof for that, but that's just my own personal hunch.
Yeah.
So moving on from Winners at War, do we have any thoughts of her on Traitors? Which this is a Survivor show, not a Traitor show, but it's part of her overall career, so we'll touch on it.
On Traders, she certainly the strategy behind that show is so different compared to Survivor that there's so many things that don't transfer over. But one thing that she did that is just, at least in the time she was in the game, she was the most dominant player making the biggest moves, regardless of whether it was the right approach to take in the traders or not.
Yeah, it surprised me that she got figured out as quickly as she did. but part of that was because Dan Giesling was dumb and fell for Peter's trap perfectly when they told him, no, it's a trap, and he insisted on the murder he chose that time. So,
Yeah. And I think that also showed because we did see Parvati saying like that was a trap. So that also goes to show how she's very self-aware. But for me, I was just really excited to see her back on our TV screens and another game show where everybody who was there is also a target or a threat or famous from their show. So it's not like she was standing out as much as she would or as much as she did on Winners at War.
we're also going to have her on our screens again at some point soon. Have you guys seen this? Deal or No
Oh
Deal
yeah,
Island 2?
yeah.
I'm excited for that. Rob brought a lot of great entertainment for Survivor, representing our show well on the first Deal or No Deal Island. I'm excited to see Parv tackle the game as well. That was a fun show. I liked it. So, moving into Align Blindside first boot. Brett, do you want to go first?
Let's go. I guess pretty expected, but with 3 players who were at one point a ally of Parvati season. So I am gonna go with Survivor Micronesia, Natalie Bolton. From Survivor Heroes versus Villains, Danielle DiLorenzo. And as short-lived as it was, I have to add it for 2 of my favorite players from Survivor Winners at War, Michelle Fitzgerald.
You want to go first, or do you want me to?
So I would align with Michelle, and then the other ones were Parvati and Natalie, right?
Um, Natalie and Danielle.
Oh. I would probably blindside Natalie because I think that she's someone who is a big threat, and I guess that leaves first vote for Danielle. But I was kind of obviously I would align with Michelle because she's my favorite Survivor player, but I also, if it was somebody else in there, I would have wanted to align with Danielle because I think obviously she was a villain, but she was very loyal to Parvati, and I really like the dynamic, so I feel like she would be someone who would be good to align with as well.
So, as much as I really like Michelle, I'm going to first boot her here. She's the only winner, so it'd be an easy move to make to convince my tribe to do. But also, I think the only one that's been able to win, probably the best player here. I'm going to have a hard time beating her. I'm going to align with Danielle. Like Titi just said, we've seen her be loyal to Parvati on Heroes vs. Villains. We've seen loyalty from her on her first season in Panama, also, season 12. So I feel like me and her could work together well, which leaves blindsiding Natalie as the only option left. But also, if I don't, she as cutthroat as she became at the end, she might blindside me and then floss her throat with my jugular or whatever she said in that one confessional. So she's got to go before I go.
I am going to agree with TT. I'll align with Michelle for the same reason. I'm sure you all saw that coming. I am going to do the opposite though here, and I'm going to blindside Danielle. I think she would be great to work with, and like you said, was loyal for the villains. Danielle and I also have something in common, being Boston Red Sox fans, so that makes an alliance a little easier. I'll first boot Natalie, who, like we said, is just a cutthroat player that has a record for voting off guys who fall for complete craps. Oh,
True, but we need to see her on the jury again to see how she tops the first time. Okay, I'm gonna go with people that, well, one of them is an ally and she butted heads with. One of them is just someone she butted heads with, and the last one is just an ally. You've got the only butted heads with is Penner from Cook Islands. You've got Russell, who was simultaneously an ally and an opponent somehow, as only he can pull off. And you've got Rob in 40.
You want to go, Titi?
Sorry. I would align with Penner just because I think he's hilarious. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's someone you want to keep around for good morale. Um, and then there was Rob and who was the other one? Sorry.
Russell.
Russell. I would first boot Russell. I think that you don't need that type of person around, and he is just not someone you want around camp just for the sabotaging and the kind of person that he is. And I would blindside Rob.
All right. I am gonna do the exact same thing as you for the same pretty much reasons. Align Jonathan, blindside Rob, first boot wrestle. Um, as much as it might be a little dangerous to go into the game with Rob and not first boot him, we have seen on Winners at War, for example, and on Heroes versus Villains that Rob can be blindsided. It's just the players in Redemption Island were not knowledgeable of the game enough to be able to pull it off.
I'm going to do the same thing, and I'll say this because I get credited a lot with creating the theory of first booting if there's only one winner there, which, I mean, it's just kind of common sense. I'm not going to take too much credit for that. But Russell is kind of like Tony in the sense that the longer they're in the game, the more dangerous they get and the more of like a foothold they get. So I feel the need to take Russell out first just before he can get any footing in the game and start to become dangerous. Because, like, with Tony, if you take him out early in Winners at War, it's done. But look what happened. The longer the season went on, the more powerful he became. Russell kind of is like that. He gets more power as he goes. So I'm going to first boot him. I'm going to align with Penner just because he's one of my favorite players. I love Penner. He's hilarious. I still love the challenge in Micro where Probst tells him to quit whining or whatever. Just that exchange is hilarious. But I also this was mostly in Cooks, but we've seen that Penner can rub people the wrong way a little bit. And it was mostly in Cooks, but we saw it even in his last season a little bit with Jeff Kent. So I feel like I have a shot to beat him. And then blindside's my only spot left for Rob after the other two.
Yeah. TT, you got 3 names?
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna do Parvati, Tyson, and Rob.
Oh gosh.
I'm going to ally with Parvati in that case, solely based on the fact that, as I've mentioned before, I took an online Zoom course with her, so we might have a pre-game relationship coming into the game, even though nowhere close to as strong as the other two players. She also would probably know that she can't beat them the same way as she could beat someone who knows nothing about playing Survivor. I'll blindside Rob again for the second time and first boot Tyson because you never know what you're going to get with Tyson if he's going to play a game like Heroes versus Villains where he totally screws up, or if he's going to play Blood versus Water where he's the dominant player who just runs through the whole game right to the end. Rob, same reasons as before.
My thinking coming into this is first off, Rob and Tyson are super close, like friends. Like they even like during the pandemic had whatever their like streaming channel or whatever it was, Rob versus Tyson, where they were like playing each other in different stuff. So you need to split those two up is my first thought. And I'm gonna first boot Tyson because like Brett said, you don't know which version of him you're gonna get. But he also is very funny and has the ability to be likable. So if I take him to the end, maybe he has more jury appeal than me. I don't know. But I'm going to first boot him. Even though Parvati's my favorite player of these three, I'm going to blindside her because I think she has a better shot of beating me at the end than Rob does, just because we've seen Rob rubs people the wrong way pretty much any season of any show he's been on. But also, when we saw Denise blindside Sandra, they started calling her the Queen Slayer. Parvati's the greatest of all time, in my opinion. So having the nickname Goat Slayer would be kind of cool. So I'm gonna go for that
Yeah.
also. And I'm gonna align with Rob because we saw, like I said, all however many seasons of Survivor, 5 that he's played on, and Deal or No Deal Island, he manages to always rub person or people the wrong way, whether it be Ben and Adam or what's her name, the older lady on Deal or No Deal Island, or you name it, Russell, Lex. So I feel like going to the end with a player as great as Rob is dangerous, but also I can try to crank up the likability and beat him on that. Was my thought process.
I think it's the same thing as Brett, but clearly I have short-term memory because I can't remember anything. But I would personally align with Parvati because she is one of my favorite Survivor players, and I honestly wouldn't care if she took me to the end and beat me just because I feel like it'd be so fun to play with her. And I would blindside Rob, and I would first boot Tyson because I know a lot of people like Tyson. Some people think that I mean, obviously he can be a very good Survivor player, but his sense of humor and the way that he like talks, even on the Challenge USA, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I think that's just a personality thing. Like, I don't think I would get along with him very well. And I mean, he does have potential to be a very good player. And I think someone like Rob, you can always blindside because he is such a dangerous player, or whatever, well-known player that people would probably always be down to vote him out pretty much at any time.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, this was
Okay.
a fun episode, you guys. So
And a really fun series too.
it was. So thank you guys, listeners, for tuning in. Stay tuned to our content. Listen to Brett and TT's content over at New Era Challengers. Pit Stop Pals are going. Just stay tuned with Reality Realm. Grab your torches and head back to camp. Bye, everyone.
And we should be back next week talking about season 47.
We should be. 1 second. All right, bye, guys. Have a great night. Have a great week.